So I'm Damien, this is Enneagram Life, and today's video is a follow-up video, and it's about the Enneagram lines of stress and growth. So I did a video saying the lines of stress and growth on the Enneagram are wrong, and this video is talking about how they could actually be right. But it's saying like they are wrong, like fundamentally, technically they're wrong. But I understand why, how it's helpful. That's probably the best word, helpful. Like they can be helpful. And because they can be helpful, these calling them lines of stress and growth. So these are the lines that connect every Enneagram type to two other Enneagram types, and they are the lines that go inside the circle of the Enneagram. So for example, Enneagram type 1 is connected via a line of growth to Enneagram type 7, and it's connected via a line of stress to Enneagram type 4. And so sometimes they're called the lines of disintegration, integration. Maybe they use terms like lines of positivity and negativity. Maybe that's used as well, but that's the concept anyway. It's like stress and growth, it's integration. Some sort of positive and negative connotation to, so a movement from one Enneagram type to another type via those internal lines is either a movement in positivity or a movement in stress or negativity, positivity and negativity. And so, yeah, like that's basically the first video was saying why they're wrong, which is true. They're fundamentally wrong because via these lines, which I call the lines of internal connection, because I don't want to label one as a positive line and one as a negative line, or I don't want to label both of them as a positive line, you know, both of the internal connection lines from one type to two other types. I don't want to name them as positive or negative. So I call them just lines of internal connection. And yeah, the fundamental idea to those lines was that when one Enneagram type is behaving like another Enneagram type, it's out of stress. And when it's behaving like the other Enneagram type that it's connected to via these internal lines, it's out of growth. And the fact is that sometimes, and particularly Enneagram type, can behave like one of these two other types out of growth or stress. Like either of those types, it can move towards this first one out of growth, and it can move this first one out of stress. It can move the second one to the second one out of growth, and to the second one out of stress. That happens, and it happens a lot, because these lines that do connect, these internal lines of connection are very important, right? They're very significant. There is a real relationship with the two types that every Enneagram type is connected to by these internal lines. There's a real connection there, and the significance of this connection actually helps prove the validity of the Enneagram in a major way. Because like the fact that each type is connected to two other types, it proves the shape of the Enneagram. It proves the order of the different types around the circle of the Enneagram. And so it lends it all validity, but I don't want to go into that now. That's a different video. So this is just saying that this relationship with one type to two other types, or any type to two other types, not type 1, just any Enneagram type, the two other types, the movement can be to either of types, can be growth or stress, positive or negative. And so labeling one of them as a growth line, labeling one of them a stress line is wrong, technically speaking. But now I'm going to talk about why it's right. So yeah, like That's the thing. I fully understand both why someone might think they are lines of growth and stress, and I understand why someone might just label them lines of growth and stress, even though they know that technically they could move to either of the type via growth or stress. And so one of the major reasons why people would see them as lines of growth and stress, it's sort of like an archetype thing that we have in our way of looking at people and way of looking at certain emotions and certain behaviors. Like we tend to have an archetypal concept of each type. It's like a caricature, it's like a simplification of each type. And this isn't a bad thing. Like, people use words like stereotype to mean archetypes, to mean caricatures. Well, caricature, I guess, is not the right word, because you could argue that means a caricature is kind of always negative. But let's use the word archetype. Like, archetypes is a different way to say stereotype. It's a very similar word, and there's a lot of academics that do talk about in other fields, not the Enneagram, stereotypes being a bad thing. And so people kind of get a concept of that as a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like tools, right? Like, I think Alfred Kubisky said the territory is not the map, or the map is not the territory, something like that. And this is kind of, it's a very helpful concept in explaining the values of archetypes. Like, if you had a map that had every single detail in that map, it would be a less useful map. If it was 100% totally accurate with nothing left out, it would not be a very effective map, because the point of a map is to simplify a route. And if they drew every rock that you were going to pass along that journey, if they drew every tree, if they drew every house that you would pass, and you had to look at each house along that journey in order to understand how to get from point A to point B, this would be a pretty useless map, but that map would be technically correct. So this is kind of part of how the value of archetypes, and how it's not about being technically correct. It's about creating something useful, creating a tool. Yeah. And so the way we tend to have these archetypes of different types, well, let's look at the type 1, for example. So the type 1 is seen as, self-righteousness is kind of their dominant defining characteristic, self-righteousness. And in the system of growth and stress and lines of growth and stress, that system, which I think Hudson and Russo are credited for that, but you might want to look that up. Anyway, so like the type 1, it moves to 7 out of growth, supposedly, and 4 out of stress. And so, the 7 is seen as a fun, light-hearted sort of type. And so when the self-righteous type moves towards becoming more light-hearted and self-righteous, we see that often as a form of growth. Yeah. And vice versa, like the 4, it's seen as thinking of itself as special and unique. That's sort of its most defining characteristics. And so when the self-righteous type starts thinking it's special and unique, So when they're self-righteous, they're kind of telling everyone what they should be doing, what's right and what's wrong. And if they're doing that because they think they're special and unique, can you see how that has a negative connotation to it? Like if someone's saying what everyone should be doing, what's right and wrong, and they're going on about how special and unique they are, suddenly they start looking like they're not telling everyone what they should do from a place of what is actually right, what is actually correct. It now starts coming from more of a place of being holier than thou, that sort of thing, thinking you're better than others. All of these kind of negative connotations. So when the one moves towards that archetype of the 4, it seems like it's a negative movement. And if it did just simply move towards the 4 like that, it would be a negative movement. And when the 1 moves towards becoming more lighthearted and fun-loving, like the 7, that's seen as a positive movement, because we like to be around, we think people should be less serious. We tend to prefer that when we're hanging around someone. We don't want to hang around someone that's super serious. Generally speaking, we might want them to be our prime minister or a president or something, because they'll take the job seriously. But a lot of the time, in human socialization, that's seen as a positive movement, being more lighthearted and fun-loving. And so, but see, it's not as simple as that, right? Like if you do look at it through that perspective as the archetypal movement from what you see as the stereotypical 1 to behaving more like a stereotypical 7, you could justifiably think that's growth. You could justifiably think it's negativity when the 1 behaves more like the 4. But actually, in reality, what happens is, like, the 7 has positive and negative traits, and it has just as many positive and negative traits as the 4. The 4 has positive and negative traits, and the 1 has positive and negative traits. So if the 1 moves towards the negative traits of the 7, that's a movement, that's a negative movement, a movement in stress, of disintegration. If it moves towards the positive elements of the 1, of the 7, sorry, if the 1 moves towards the positive elements of the 7, well, that's a positive movement, a movement of growth, a movement of integration. And same with the 4. If the 1 moves towards the negative elements of the 4, that's definitely negative. It's definitely stress. If it moves towards the positive elements of the 4, that's definitely growth. That's definitely positive. And so you can behave, any particular type can behave like the positive or negative elements of the other types. So this is why the, just technically speaking, if a 1 is behaving like a 7, it doesn't mean that that's a form of growth. Pretty much that's it, really. Yeah, but the way that we perceive things, or many people perceive things, it's understandable how someone could label it like the way, well, like they have labeled it, the lines of growth and lines of stress. Yeah, and I also think that when I first began learning the Enneagram, it did help me to call down lines of growth and stress. It helped me to sort of understand my own movement towards the other types, the internal lines of connection, or what I saw as lines of growth and stress at that time. That's why in my first video about this topic, I talk about how I saw it as a training wheels concept, where it's all about, I used to, even though I thought that calling growth and stress lines was not technically correct, I just made some videos where I did call them lines of growth and stress, because I thought, okay, well, these are beginner videos and we'll give people this simplistic concept to begin with, and then hopefully down the line, after that's helped them, like training wheels, we'll remove the training wheels and we'll tell them, we'll give them a much more accurate but more complicated, more nuanced concept. That's about it, really. So yeah, that's why I'm not against calling them the lines of growth and stress necessarily. Hope that clears things up. It's March 2025. Thank you.